Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest edition of the World Report television show. I'm Scott Crowfoot. On today's show, Turkish protests and the silence of this administration. We'll tell you why. Is another U.S. housing bubble being created? World Bank President Kim is concerned the end of global easing could spell big trouble. Major revolts in Congress over Obamacare and immigration. Our history segment explores the Chicago Alinsky gang. Now to our top stories. A government out of control spending, out of control spying. While the country is focused on domestic spying, wiretaps, the prism of our emails, the IRS intimidation, Congress is spending billions of dollars on the eve of a new debt-ceiling crisis. Now the Senate has taken the first steps towards legalizing tens of millions of people that can only stress out an already stretched out labor market. Joining us to discuss these crucial issues is the Desert Sun's global economist and the World Report's Maury Beschloss. Maury, underemployment, unemployment, the technical figures the government uses is 7.6%, but
ridiculous.
We know it's about 13.
It's ridiculous. It's a lie.
14%.
It is about 14%, the
if
way
we're
I
talking
figure it.
about legalizing tens of millions of people, when they say 11, you got to double or triple the number because everything the government says is wrong. What is that going to do to the labor market? And the fact that Obamacare is forcing companies like Walmart to only hire part-time employees.
Yeah, well, you're bringing up two issues. You're bringing up the immigration issue as being a basic burden to a whole unemployment situation. I'm saying is that's not the big burden. The big burden is the fact that we have the answer as far as tremendously increasing our economic growth, and that is energy development through hydraulic fracturing. I've checked this out and I can support this totally, that within 5 or 6 years, the United States of America will be the outstanding producer of crude oil in the whole world today. We will be producing more than Saudi Arabia. Do you know that in the last year, we have increased our production per day, more so than any other country, 1 million barrels a day. That's just the beginning. The point is we are going to be producing not only in the places where we have it now, but if they take the Environmental Protection Agency away with a lot of phony issues based on the ideological extremists who are saying the world's going to end tomorrow, if they put these guys and restrict them from doing the things they're doing to our energy development, we do nothing but look forward to a tremendous amount of need for employment.
And this is in spite of the fact that federal lands are being restricted from what you're talking about, fracking, oil, gas.
Not only federal lands, but major states. California, something happened a week ago that somehow, I have it in my blog as we speak, and it's going to be a column shortly, and that is the fact that the Assembly, that's the lower house of the state of California's government, voted against a moratorium on fracking. The California Air Resources Board is even worse than the Environmental Protection Agency. They're sort of part of the total picture, but they're more extremist than they are, if that's possible. And they came up with a moratorium that said there will be no hydraulic fracturing in the state of California, despite the fact that the Monterey Shale, which is the shales are what they are tapping into in order to get the oil and natural gas out, is the largest in the United States. And it has been projected that if we can develop the Monterey Shale and develop the hydraulic fracturing in the whole state of California, we will not only hire 500,000 people in the next 6 or 7 years, we will be adding $50 billion in revenue to our tax. Just the taxes alone will be added to $50 billion. Even right now, he hasn't said it publicly, but Jerry Brown has indicated informally that he would support fracturing in the state of California if it isn't stopped in the Assembly or the state Senate.
And what's the chances of it not being stopped in the democratically controlled Senate and Assembly?
Well, the Assembly already has voted it down. And somehow the media has not carried that. And you know how it got voted down? About a third of the Democrats sided with the Republicans because they come from the Central California area, where the unemployment rate, even by the standards of the government, where they talk about 7.6%, is roughly about double that in the central part of California. So the unions are actually siding with the conservatives in order to keep their jobs and to keep the wages from being down as relatively low as they are, which, by the way, also impacts the immigration issue. The unions are the ones that are saying, wait a second, we don't want to have citizenship suddenly in the hands of 11 million, which, as you say, could be 15 or 20 million, whatever it is, all the undocumented aliens in this country who are living under the, shall we say, under the ceiling of identity. If you throw them into the job picture right now, it's only going to make it worse. I fully agree with you. I'm saying, however, the biggest problem is the enemy against developing energy and also creating better export jobs. There's a lot of things we could do. Is a government that's anti-business and anti-labor, because when people don't work, you know, the $1 trillion stimulus that was passed in February of 2009, nobody has ever identified where that money went. It was supposed to go toward infrastructure. You know, Roosevelt, I have a bone to pick with him on many issues, but he came in, and as soon as he came in, he started a major nationwide works project of, you know, those alphabet agencies, WPA, PWA, CCC, Civilian Construction Corps, and so on. This guy said he never did it. He was going to use that money in order to influence this country to come up with a health care program when we were in desperate shape. That's the thing. It's unforgivable. There are many things that Obama has done that are unforgivable, but the most unforgivable of all was when we were in a position where we could have gone into a deep depression. He used whatever influence, whatever clout, whatever initiative he had in order to force a health care program, because no other president has been able to push through a socialized health care program in this country.
And now we find out that several members of Congress, dozens of them, are threatening to quit because they're going to have to be into the exchange. And these are the same guys that shoved this down the American people's throats.
They're afraid they're going to be into this exchange. No, at this time they will probably try to squeeze out of it, but now that it's become a public issue, and they have to go along with Obamacare like all the rest of the country, they want out of there while they still have what they have.
Or an exemption. And there's been 2,000 exemptions that have been put out there.
Now that it's become a public issue, it's going to be much tougher to get an exemption, because now everything becomes politicized. And consequently, that's why they want out. They want out while they can still solidify what they have now and not be subject to something that comes after the exemptions have been withdrawn. So
in terms of the fracking and the oil development, I've said this several times on the show before, if the American government's policy was to use other countries' oil and natural gas first and save ours, I could understand that. But that's not their position. Their position is that somehow we're endangering the wildlife or the environment, and it's never been cleaner or safer.
But you see, the thing is, this is a comparative thing. Let's say there is some merit to the fact that there are some dangers involved. I don't think it's going to start an earthquake, but you know, they'll do anything to convince the average person that this is going to change the end. It's going to cause the end of the world. But even if there was some problem, our biggest problem is our economy, is getting people back to work. It's getting the revenues in order to balance our budget. We have a guarantee that will happen if we can broaden our whole energy development thing.
And all you have to do is look at North Dakota if you want to have any kind of idea of what it could be. Tell the folks what's going on in North Dakota.
North Dakota was a farm state, 600,000 people, a barren state, nothing coming and going out of there. But from an economic standpoint, it was almost a cipher. Well, now the hottest property as far as getting money for your land or having jobs is North Dakota. Now, granted, it's a small state, 600,000 people, but they don't have enough housing. Half the people now that are working in North Dakota have to live in vans. You know, they can't.
And the unemployment rate is under 5%.
No, it's 3. It's 3%. They also have a little Silicon Valley now. They're attracting educational institutions. It's like a little Shangri-La there. It's a good example because it's small enough you can focus on it. But let's talk.
And it's all private land.
You see what's happened. I wrote a blog about using Texas and California as an example of what's happening that's good and what's happening that's bad. Now, I'm not saying that Texas is all perfect, that they're wonderful people and all the people in California. No, that's not the point. The point is that decisions that have been made in Texas. They wait a second. We got oil underfoot here. We're going to produce it. And they got a governor who says, listen, we don't have to have a state income tax because we've got it here on the ground. We got jobs. People are happy there. Why? Listen,
they have their own electricity grid.
That's a very good point. They have their own electricity. They're doing here's Texas.
They've got aerospace. They've got agriculture. They've got oil. They've got their own grid. They've got harbors.
I'm impressed.
Ports.
You really have all the answers right there. You're absolutely right.
Well, thanks for telling me earlier.
No, really, that you absolutely are correct on that. And the thing is, you've got Florida, Arizona, and Texas, and those are very 3 disparate states, but they don't have any income tax. They don't have a state income tax. They also have
Texas, you mean?
Texas, I'm sorry.
And Florida. I mean, yeah, Arizona does.
Yeah, they all have conservative governments. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, governors are conservative.
Rick Perry.
Rick Perry.
Rick Scott. And Jan Brewer.
Those are 3 wonderful governors. You're absolutely right, and they're governing. Isn't it kind of interesting? You know, I don't like a superficial way of discussing politics, but in almost every case where you have a Republican governor, you've got a state that's thriving, and they're usually backed up by state assembly and senate, which, by the way, came through because of the Tea Party. If you didn't have the Tea Party back in 2010, you wouldn't have had states shifting over from Democrats to Republicans. Well, the biggest shift, by the way, in the history of this country that happened in 2010. Unfortunately, we forget about that because then you had 2012 where the bad guys came back in again.
Well, you've got the IRS and you've got the targeting of the Tea Party and the squelching of donations. Well, I mean, they couldn't raise money. They couldn't do fundraisers.
I understand that.
It's a big deal.
No.
The suppression of votes. Yeah, and it's always the left that wants to talk about suppressing votes. Isn't that funny?
Or voter ID. My God, you've got to go, if you want to go buy a bottle of beer, you've got to show your ID card. For some reason, to vote, you're not supposed to show your ID. It's racial profiling if you ask somebody of a minority to show their ID. It's almost like people that are a minority are sacrosanct, and they shouldn't have to stand the same things that a person that's more traditional in their background.
Well, I think that we need to be careful because the pendulum always swings very far to the other side when it does swing back.
Well, it becomes very turbulent.
We need to step aside for a brief moment, and when we return, we'll have more economic news, our global outlook, political insider, and the history segment. If you'd like to email us with any questions or comments or information regarding the show, just log on to our website, theworldreport.org. You can also catch up on some of the segments if you missed them online at theworldreport.org. We'll be right back.